Story 1. So I recently encountered an entitled brat. A little background for this story. I was sent home from work on Friday due to being sick. But this happened when I was on my way to work. I was sitting in the back of a double-decker bus on the bottom level. I had on a body warmer, hat, and gloves, as well as my headphones, although I had not turned them on yet, which is important for later. I was also playing Pokemon Go, all while my stomach felt like it was spinning non-stop. Then a man and two primary school kids, a boy and a girl, got on the bus. The man, who I assumed was the dad, sat in the seat next to me. The boy sat across from his dad, and the girl sat across from me. She was the entitled brat. From the second she sat down across from me, she just stared at me with a blank, expressionless look. I tried to ignore her, but it was a bit difficult to ignore a child silently staring at me. This went on for about 10 minutes before her dad asked her a question, and she ignored him and kept staring at me. The dad asked her again. She ignored him again, and that was when the dad finally asked her, "Why are you staring at the man?" She ignored him once more, but then she started pretending to crack her knuckles over and over again, while still staring at me. That was when the entitlement started. The dad, clearly getting annoyed, asked, "What are you doing?" And the brat then turned and looked at him. She replied, "He took a photo of me, and he's been licking his lips at me." This caused her dad, the boy I think was her brother, and the nearby passengers to look at me. I did not react at first because I honestly was not focused on her. I was trying to ignore her and play on my phone until my stop came. She then pointed at me and shouted, "Take his phone." Her dad looked unsure of what to do, but the brother immediately stepped in to defend me, saying, "No, he didn't, and no, he hasn't." The brat then turned her whole body and glared at her brother and yelled, "Yes, he did. If I said he did, then he did." The brother just shook his head, looked at the dad, and said, "She's doing it again." This seemed to break the dad out of whatever trance he was in, and he looked at the brat, who now had the expression of a deer caught in headlights. The dad said, "No, he didn't. Take his phone. He has been sitting here with his headphones too." The dad shook his head, pressed the stop button, and when the bus stopped, he and the brother had to usher the brat off the bus, all while she kept saying, "This isn't our stop," and "Just take the phone." I had not even moved. I was no longer playing Pokemon Go, but I pretended to continue playing just to avoid interacting. When the bus started moving again, the brat screamed, "But I wanted them." I assumed she was talking about my phone and headphones. I reacted to this by looking out the window when I heard her scream. Another passenger turned and said to me, "She said you took a photo of her." I replied, "Yes, I know. I heard everything, and judging by the response from the man and the boy who were with her, she has done this kind of thing before." Nothing else happened after that, but the whole situation could have gone badly. She was accusing me of something that could have gotten me kicked off the bus or even caused the police to get involved. I honestly have no idea what she was after. It is not like my phone or headphones are new, and the fact that the dad and the brother stepped in really helped. If they had not, my only hope would have been to ask the driver to review the camera feed on the bus. But that is a big if, as I am not even sure he would have been able to access it from the bus itself. Still, what in the world did she want my phone for? Story 2. I have many tales regarding this entitled girlfriend and her boyfriend, who is my ex-boyfriend and current friend, and who we will call Finn, but one of the most eye-rolly was the incident of the done photogate. So me and the boyfriend have been friends since school. We dated for like 3 weeks when we were 14, and safe to say we were just better as mates. No love loss or longing on either side. Anyways, on a drunken night out with Finn, I met this girl who I bonded with in the bathroom, and I introduced her later to Finn, and they had an instant click. Awesome. Anyways, 2 years in, and this girlfriend, whilst also my friend, and whilst we all hung out as couples, always seemed to have a weird thing about mine and Finn's friendship, which she was always vocal about. Despite us never hanging out alone, or actually doing anything that would warrant the need for me to be taken aside on a regular basis, and be told it wasn't appropriate for me to be standing so close to her boyfriend, etc. I mostly ignored it and just kept trying to keep within her boundaries of acceptable, except I had the most grievous slip. I shared a photo of a group of us taken way before Finn or I even knew she existed. The photo was taken for my birthday, which consisted of about 12-15 people. The girls, including Finn's girlfriend at the time, were all sat on the sofa, and the floor, and the boys were behind the sofa, arms around each other, not touching any girls. So to be clear, a picture of lots of people, girls with girls, boys with boys. Anyways, I shared it because it was a great picture and completely forgot about it. Until I went to her house to give her her birthday present. I just find you really disrespectful. What? What have I done now? I just don't find it appropriate, you sharing a picture of Finn and his old girlfriend. Me, having no clue what she's talking about because it didn't even cross my mind. What the heck are you talking about? The picture. Don't play dumb, the picture of Finn and his ex. Finn was looking helpless now and just trying to find a hole to crawl in at this point. Me, finally realizing what she meant. You mean the picture of all of us from a night out where the girl he was seeing wasn't touching him, and that relationship ended long before you even existed to us, and they broke up the day after the picture was taken. That picture. Exactly. It's not appropriate to share pictures of people's exes. How would you feel if I shared a picture of your boyfriend and his ex together? Me, still flabbergasted. If it was a group picture, I wouldn't care. If it was a picture of them as a couple, I'd get where you were coming from, but in this instance, nope. You should apologize. I'll tell you what, I'm gonna go, because I'm not going to kick off in your house, but frankly this whole thing is winding me up. I'm not going to apologize, and I'm not taking the picture down. This conversation happened about 3 weeks after I shared it. Happy birthday. Bye. I left, and sadly without a witty retort other than the facts, because I still to this day remain flabbergasted about the whole situation. We didn't stay in contact after this, which I'm so thankful for, as it was getting so painful to stay around her. Story 3. I don't remember how old I was, but I was around 4 or 5, and at the time, I had bad asthma that I've grown out of now. It was at this age when my mom, my younger sister, grandma, and I all went down to watch a Canada Day parade, which happens every year. It just so happened that the newly wedded Prince William and Princess Kate were a part of the parade this year, and nearly the whole city seemed to want to catch a glimpse of them. We got there by bus because, on days like these, it is nearly impossible to find any, let alone free, parking regardless of visiting royalty. When we finally got to a place to watch the parade, there was hardly any space for any of my family to sit down, and the parade officially started an hour after we got there. Honestly, I was just excited that I'd see a real live princess, but it was a really hot day and the large glass buildings surrounding us didn't help, with all the glare being directed on us. I eventually got so tired and I really just wanted to sit down because I woke up earlier than usual. Near us was a bit of sidewalk that this family of 4 was occupying, one middle-aged woman, introducing the entitled mother who I somehow distinctly remember having a Karen haircut, and her 3 teenage children. There was a picnic blanket on the ground, but each of the 4 had portable chairs that took up 25% of the space. A tiny ledge of sidewalk was left uncovered by this blanket, so, being the innocent 5-year-old girl I made sure that I didn't sit on the blanket, but only on the exposed sidewalk. It wasn't as comfortable as I had hoped, honestly, but it felt so much better being able to relax my strained stubby legs for a bit and calm my heavy breathing down, not wanting to bother my mom for my inhaler since she was taking care of my 1-year younger sister. I sat there for all but 2 minutes when who could have possibly approached me but the entitled mother herself. I saw her walking up to me from the corner of my eye, but I was a shy kid and assumed that she was just going to walk by, and so I shouldn't stare because I was brought up with manners. Of course, I had wished that she would have ignored me as I sat and played with some tiny pebbles at my feet, but in front of me a shadow started to loom over me and grow, until it stopped and I felt a presence behind me. I hesitated for a second before looking up at this woman who had an absolute sneer on her face. Now again, keep in mind that I was 5 years old at the time, and many of my friends and family describe me as quite a pushover even to this day, because I'm too nice. Trying to ignore her expression, I put on a big happy smile for the woman, hoping that she'd be as nice as the other adults I've encountered up till this point, and give her a squeaky hi, a little nervous that a strange woman came up to me. She continued glaring at me for a second, and I was completely confused, and I'm sure my expression showed so. The entitled mother: "Little girl, you are sitting on me and my family's space, and you need to leave." She was big and a relatively tall woman, so I was completely intimidated. I nodded my head and stood up only to find my mom glaring at the woman. I went to hide behind my mom's legs as I watched their encounter. Suddenly, a big argument broke between my mom and the entitled mother that I don't entirely remember because, through teary eyes and continued heavy breathing, I was just looking at the entitled mother's kids who were just watching all this go down, but I will try to recount all I can. "My mom, why can't my daughter sit there? She is quite tired, and she isn't taking up much room. She's been standing here for a while now." Entitled mother: "Well, that's not my fault, is it? My family woke up at 4 this morning just to get this spot, and no one is taking it from us, especially not her. We aren't taking anything. She is 5 years old and has been out in the sun all morning, and she has asthma. She is tired, and just a small bit of sidewalk isn't encroaching on your space. You have enough space as it is, and she is a polite girl. We claimed this spot first, and it's not my fault that your kid can't handle this. Might as well just leave. You aren't even from here, so you shouldn't even be allowed to watch." For context, me and my whole family is Filipino, and my mom had a slight accent at the time since English is her second language. I didn't understand at the time what this witch was implying, young child and all that, but now thinking about it has me absolutely pissed. Unfortunately, even my mom forgot how this all ended, but I do remember having to stand when I saw Princess Kate waving at the crowd, as both her and Prince William passed in their black limo. It's safe to say that the entitled mother got what she wanted, and we had left immediately after. I was recalling the incident with my mom just recently, and I started fuming when I realized that the entitled mother and her kids literally had no right to reserve all that space, seeing as it was public property, and how complacent her kids were just watching it happen. So sadly, no just desserts delivered on this occasion. Story 4. This happened some years ago during my first year at college. I was just returning to campus after a winter break and was traveling from the airport at night to reach my college on the other side of the city. This meant I needed to change a couple of subway lines and buses. What I had with me were a big suitcase, my backpack, and a notebook carrying case. I got off the subway and started looking for the elevator so I would not have to use the escalators with all my belongings and potentially cause any problems. I found the elevator, and it had just closed its doors while a couple of people were already in line waiting. I got in line, and an entitled woman arrived and started pushing people aside, attempting to cut to the front. She did not look anywhere close to elderly. As she tried to move past me, I turned to her and said, "Ma'am, where do you think you're going? You need to get in line to use the elevator, as all these people have been waiting just like you." She opened her eyes wide, made a disgusted expression, and said, "Don't you people read?" She pointed to a sign that reads something similar to, "Please give priority to the elderly and disabled." Normally, I am a very nice and polite person, but I was exhausted and could not deal with her attitude, so I said, "Oh, I'm sorry. Which one are you, elderly or disabled?" That immediately set her off. She began shaking with anger and shouted, "You are just a rude, ignorant young person. I am older than you, and you will treat me with respect." I smiled and replied, "You may be older than me, but you are not elderly. Plus, you talk about respect, yet you pushed aside a mother with a stroller and a man in a wheelchair because you did. Where is your respect for the people you cut in front of?" She then held out her arms in her fur coat, giving herself an even more entitled presence, and tried hitting me with one of her bags. I moved out of the way, and she ended up hitting another lady instead. At that point, other people began vocally supporting me, and someone apparently called a security guard. The guard arrived, and everyone started pointing at the entitled woman, so he asked her to follow him. She immediately escalated the situation and started shouting at everyone, beginning with the guard and then at me. The guard wasted no time and called for backup as he tried to hold her, because she attempted to run away in heels, which was honestly a wild sight. More guards arrived and escorted her away, especially since the lady she had accidentally hit had a split lip and wanted to press charges. I was asked to follow them as well, and we took another elevator. The police were called, they spoke with everyone, and both the other lady and I explained what had happened. In the end, the entitled woman was taken to the police station along with the other lady so she could file charges. Have a nice day or night, everyone. Story 5. About 20 minutes ago, I'm in Sephora. I had gotten an email with a discount code and figured I'd treat myself to some new makeup for being an adult and getting my vaccine, as well as replacing the rotors on my car. So I'm browsing the eyeshadow, looking for a palette I want but don't already have. I'm wearing a tie-dye tank top, tie-dye bandana in my hair, and a pair of paint-stained jeans from when I helped paint my dad's fence a few days ago. So unless there's some sort of casual Wednesday I'm unaware of, I certainly don't look like an employee. Due to the panorama, you can't test the makeup like normal. This isn't a problem for me. I know what brands I like and work well for me. But apparently, some lady had a huge problem with this, because the next thing I know, there's a tap on my shoulder, so I turn around. I'm face to face with what I can best describe as Mimi, from the Drew Carey Show 2.0. Her face had so much makeup caked onto it, I could see where she applied different shade concealers very clearly, almost like lines on her face. Her eyes were more done up than a fashion couture model during Fashion Week, but were smeared like she had just got done a 4-hour crying session. I want to try that one, as she pointed at a colorful palette. I bet you do. What's that supposed to mean? She said with a sneer. It looks like your eyeshadow could use a touch-up. I replied with a shrug. How dare you insult me? I'll have your job. She even kinda stomped as she said this, like an angry rhinoceros. Good luck with that. But if this is how you treat employees, I'm glad you got me instead. They don't get paid enough to put up with your nonsense. For whatever reason, she's still not convinced that I don't work there, and she stomps off to find a manager, still shrieking about disrespect and how she's never and blah blah. I figure the manager will take it and go back to looking at the palettes. Not so lucky, about a minute later, she comes huffing back, manager in tow looking like a poor pup who had just been beat. That one, she screams while pointing at me. That's the one who insulted me, and I demand you do something about it right now, she cried, again stomping her feet on the last 2 syllables. The manager looks at me, looks at Mimi, shakes her head and says, Ma'am, she clearly doesn't work here. She's a customer just like you. I'm not sure what you want me to do. I'm sorry if she upset you. But unless she put her hands on you or threatened you, there's not much I can do. Realization slowly washed over the woman, and her face went from being red like a cherry from being angry, to being pink like bubblegum from being embarrassed. She stuttered out half an apology, oh, I'm so, yeah, then said to the manager, well, I still want to try that palette. At this point, my mind was made up. There was only one of those palettes left on the floor, and while they might have had more in the back, she was going to wait for it. Without a word, I grabbed the palette and started walking towards the line. Mimi nearly starts crying at this point. Did you see that? Can she do that? I wanted that palette. The manager simply responded, Ma'am, you asked to sample the palette, and unfortunately right now, due to the redacted, I can't let you do that. As I already stated, she is a customer, and if she wants to buy that palette, she is absolutely allowed. If you're going to keep causing a scene, I'm going to need to ask you to leave. Mimi turned on her heels and went to sulk in the corner of the store. I checked out and have been sitting in my car waiting for her to leave the store, so I can go back and return this hideous palette. Screw her. Update: she finally left the store. No bag in hand. I waited for her to exit the parking lot to ensure she didn't see me going back in. When I walked back in the door, the employee watching the door started cracking up. I asked what had happened with Mimi 2.0. Apparently, she was so irate that I took the last one, so she asked to buy the sample. They couldn't let her do that. She then insisted that an employee go check the back and not come out until they've looked everywhere for another one. So they sent an employee in the back, read equals smoke break, to look for nearly 20 minutes. I imagine that the employee had multiple smokes, and after dealing with this lady, I don't blame her. The employee came back and told her they looked everywhere, but they didn't have any more. At this point, Mimi picked up the pallet closest to her and threw it on the ground in protest. The manager told her she would be paying for it and leaving the premises immediately, and if she didn't, they'd be calling the cops. Mimi forked over the money and hustled her ample behind out of the store. At this point, I said, "Man, in that case, I'm glad I waited to see her leave the parking lot before I came to return this." And the employee doubled over with laughter. She thought I was just checking up on the situation. She had no idea I didn't actually want the pallet. Generally, I'm one of the nicest people you'll ever meet. But disrespecting an employee who is just trying to do their job is one surefire way to piss me off. And I have no problem standing up for the person who most likely can't, or chance losing their job. Thank you to all our essential workers. Yes, I know makeup isn't essential. This isn't for those people. But thank all of you who work retail of any sort and make our lives possible. Story 6. This was when I was 18. I'm 34 now, so 2004 to 2005. Think pre-iPhone. But cell phones like the Nokia 3310 existed, which I had one because my parents wanted to make sure I always could be contacted. I worked at a bar chain restaurant for 6 months, let's call it C. It was a completely new store. When we opened, we were the only building for 8 blocks, except for the sister restaurant next door that was part of the same investment group as C. It was a decent upper-middle-class white neighborhood, so we'd get lots of people in the door. I was originally hired as to-go, but I was trained up in almost everything in the restaurant, and I frequently filled shifts, and I got the most hours for it. It was the worst job I have ever had, and still is. After getting shifted around to different homes, to-go then quality assurance specialist, then host, sometimes server, I eventually ended up in bus, cleaning tables. They promised they would move me off of the bus once we had bussers, but, as we'll find out later, that day never came. The main reason this happened is that we ran out of bussers. They tried hiring bussers at a rapid rate, but it didn't work. The average survival rate for a busser was 2 weeks, including training time. Eventually, our reputation of chewing out bussers made its rounds. No one would even show up for interviews for the job. A pecking order had been established. At the top, you had the managers, then it was the servers, then it was the bar servers, restaurant servers, etc. Guess what was at the bottom? That's right, bussers. Anytime I spoke up about how people needed to pre-bus their tables, people scoffed and said I should just do my job. I explained how I could clear an entire restaurant by myself if everyone pre-bussed their tables, 30 seconds per table versus 8 minutes per table. Deaf ears. So, I have to explain why there's a huge time differential between a pre-bus table and a total bus table. If the servers took every plate off the table, even if the table was grody, I could wipe it into my bucket, clean up a few things, wipe off the seat, reset the center of the table, and move on to the next table. I'd be in and out in 30 seconds and on to the next table. However, if I had to totally bus a table, I'd have to take all of the plates, organize everything on the tab. Time varied depending on the number of people at the table. 2 minutes for a 2-top, 4-5 minutes for a 4-top, etc. If a table had ordered lots of drinks, multiple fajitas, each fajita meal contained no less than 6 dishes, and/or had been particularly unsanitary about their eating practices, unruly kids usually, you could add up to 3 minutes per table. This also compounds that I had to go back to the kitchen and sort through all of the plates, cups, etc. Well, 2 months into we're going to move you off of busing once we find bussers. It's a busy Saturday night. I'm talking 1 hour wait at 6:30 p.m. here. Half the tables are currently dirty, and I'm working hard. But each table takes about 5 minutes because no one is pre-bussing tables. I'm told the priority is the restaurant, so I had to tell the bar waiters that they probably wouldn't be bussed at all because it would be so busy. They were not having that, and the on-shift assistant manager told me I should do my job, but I should still prioritize the restaurant, not the bar. Whatever. I'm constantly telling servers to pre-bus their tables, only to be ignored. It was a particularly bad night, so I asked if the dishwashers could help me out when I brought back my tabs instead of organizing everything myself. They were nice, so they agreed, and it was a decent system. Cut out 2-3 minutes per table. It was still pretty hell, with lots of people wanting food. It still didn't help that I had to go back to the kitchen every time there was a full bus table. Enter Karen, queen of the bar server witches. Remember that pecking order I mentioned? Yeah, she was the queen of the server order. She was one of the ones that constantly berated me for my job performance, despite the fact that I did more than almost anyone else in the restaurant. She made my last 2 months a living hell, constantly telling me I didn't do a good job, that she had to wait for me too long, etc. I constantly told the assistant managers and manager about the disrespect I received, and they said I should just man up. She never got a single write-up. One particularly busy Saturday night, Karen was a server in the bar side, which meant she wasn't in the priority. I told her that I couldn't bus her tables unless she pre-bussed them, and only if there weren't restaurant tables I needed to bus. She was constantly telling me I needed to bus her tables and I was lazy, despite the fact that I had lifted over 300 tabs that night. She wasn't the priority. She didn't pre-bus any of her tables, and she was always on the back dock smoking. Once that night, a nice couple saw me working at the table behind them, and politely asked if they could talk to their server so they could take their order. She had left them alone for 15 minutes while she was smoking on the back dock and flirting with one of the prep cooks. She scoffed when I interrupted her flirting. "Oh, I'm sorry, Karen. I'm sorry I interrupted your 6th flirting break today, so you can do the thing you were hired to do." About 6:30 p.m. that night, the restaurant got flooded with people. 1 hour of waiting again, and I had to push myself to the limit. I was flipping tables, despite absolutely zero of the servers pre-bussing. However, since the restaurant was the priority, I couldn't get to her tables at all. Finally, we got a dip. I could finally get to her 3 tables, and all of them aren't pre-bussed. So, I have to do the full bussing for her tables, despite them having been vacant for almost 45 minutes. After the first table, she follows me back to the second table and tells me I need to hurry, and I'm garbage at my job, and I'm making her lose money. I tell her to leave me alone and don't reprimand me in the front of the house. It was embarrassing, with bar patrons looking over their shoulder, and I could see they honestly felt sorry for me. I was at the lowest point in my life at that point in time. I honestly felt like I was the worst human being in the world. Once she left, I stopped bussing for a second and sat down at the table for a second. I looked at the dirty half-full tab, and I got up. The table wasn't finished, and I left my dirty tab on the seat. I went to the back end to go. It wasn't active, and this was before widespread internet. We got maybe 15 orders per night, so the managers had relegated to-go duties to the quality assurance specialist that serviced the rest of the restaurant. It was easily accessible for them, but it was also vacant at that point in time. Call-in to-go was a relatively new and novel concept. I put down my headset, turned it off, pulled out a to-go pad, and wrote a full note noting how this restaurant is going to go down the toilet unless the managers get some courage and reprimand the staff for treating bussers like crap. I then left, without telling anyone. I was called on my cell phone about 5 minutes into my drive home, and the assistant manager told me, "You still have a shift." My response was, "No, I don't. I quit." "You still have a shift." Again, my response is, "No, I freaking don't need to be disrespected like I have. I quit." She had the gall to repeat herself, "You still have a shift." I hung up and turned off my phone. It turned out that I left just in time for the dinner rush. Saturdays we closed at midnight, so For those last 4 hours it was hell in a handbasket. I was told that the assistant manager prevented anyone from going home until 2 a.m. because the restaurant was basically a trash basket by the end. Wait times at 10 p.m. were capped because they were, well, over 2 hours. Host told me later on that she had to turn away 40 families that night because everything went to hell. Some people just left while waiting for a table. Orders were getting misplaced. This information made it up to corporate, and they had to call in a fixer team to figure out what happened. They wanted to call me, but I wasn't going to talk to them. There was some restructuring in the business. The manager got shifted to another position in the company. The assistant manager that called on staff was let go. Karen rode up, relegated to the crappy shifts, so she eventually left. I didn't return for 2 months, but not as an employee, but a customer. I was told all this by one of the remaining assistant managers, the one that actually treated me like a human being, and he gave me all of my tip shares, which was nice. The next best part of this, the day after I left this restaurant, my best friend found an ad that a huge game maker was looking for quality assurance specialists. We applied that day, and the following week, I got interviewed and hired on the spot. He didn't make it. It was the beginning of my programming career. I advanced through that job, got over to automation programming, then got hired at other companies. Now, I'm a senior programmer for a sheriff's office with 14 years of programming experience.